There are sailboats so problematic, so riddled with defects, so notorious for destroying their owners financially and emotionally, that even dealerships, the people whose entire business model depends on selling boats, are refusing to take them in trade. Think about that for a moment. A broker whose commission depends on selling you a boat is telling you to walk away. A dealership that makes money on every transaction is refusing to list certain models, even when owners are practically begging them to take the boat at a massive loss. That's not just a red flag. That's a blazing warning siren that should make you run in the opposite direction. Today, we're exposing the 5 sailboats so bad that even dealerships are refusing to sell them. These aren't just boats with minor issues or boats that depreciate faster than average. These are sailboats with reputations so toxic, with problem patterns so consistent, with owner horror stories so widespread that the marine industry has quietly blacklisted them. Brokers won't list them. Dealers won't accept them in trade. Marine surveyors groan when they're called to inspect one. And insurance companies either refuse coverage or charge premiums so astronomical that most owners simply give up. What makes a boat so bad that even people whose job is to sell boats won't touch it? It's a combination of catastrophic design flaws, systemic construction defects, parts that are impossible to source, warranties that manufacturers won't honor, and a cascade of owner complaints so voluminous that the entire industry knows these boats by reputation alone. We're talking about boats where the problems aren't isolated incidents, but predictable patterns. Boats where nearly every owner reports the same failures, the same frustrations, the same financial nightmares. Boats that have spawned entire online support groups dedicated not to celebrating the sailing lifestyle, but to commiserating about shared misery. And here's what should terrify you if you're boat shopping right now. These boats are still out there. They're still listed on sailing websites, still sitting in marinas, still being sold by private sellers who either don't know what they have or who are deliberately trying to pass their problem off to the next unsuspecting buyer. The listings look great. The photos show gleaming gel coat and tidy interiors. The descriptions use words like well-maintained and turnkey and ready to cruise. But those listings don't mention the systemic issues, the class action lawsuits, the manufacturer defects bulletins, or the fact that if you try to trade this boat in 3 years from now, no dealer will touch it. We're counting down from number 5 to number 1, and I'm saving the absolute worst for last. Number 1 on this list is a boat from a major manufacturer, a boat that was heavily marketed and sold in significant numbers, a boat that looked like a great value proposition until owners discovered defects so severe, so expensive to repair, and so widespread that the manufacturer eventually faced legal action. This is a boat that dealerships will literally laugh you out of their office if you try to trade it in. And if you currently own one, I'm sorry, but you need to hear what I'm about to tell you. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this channel exists to expose the truths that the marine industry doesn't want discussed, the problems that manufacturers hide, the defects that dealers hope you won't discover until after the check clears. And drop a comment below. Have you ever encountered one of these boats? Do you know someone who bought one and regretted it? The community warnings are what save future buyers from making expensive mistakes. Now, let's get into it, starting with number 5. Number 5, J30. Starting at number 5, we have a boat that shocks many people because J-Boats has an excellent reputation for building high-quality performance cruisers. The J30, introduced in the early 1980s as an affordable racing boat that could also handle weekend cruising, seemed like a winner on paper. It was fast, relatively affordable, and carried the prestigious J-Boats name. But the J30 has developed such a problematic reputation over the decades that dealerships have quietly stopped accepting them in trade. And here's why. The fundamental problem with the J30 isn't that it's a bad sailing boat in terms of performance. It actually sails quite well and can be competitive in racing. The problem is that it's a 40-year-old design that was built light for racing performance. and those construction methods have not aged well at all. The hull was constructed using techniques that prioritized weight savings over longevity, and 4 decades later, the consequences of those choices are becoming catastrophically expensive for owners. The core issue is literally the core. Many J30s were built with balsa core in the hull and deck to save weight. Balsa coring, when properly done and maintained, can be fine. But the J30's coring has proven problematic because water intrusion over the decades has led to widespread core rot. And we're not talking about isolated cases of rot around a poorly sealed through hull or deck fitting. We're talking about systematic, extensive rot that affects large sections of the hull and deck, rendering the structure compromised and requiring repairs that often exceed the boat's market value. Marine surveyors who inspect J30s report finding rot so extensive that the hull sounds hollow when tapped, that deck sections are soft and spongy underfoot, that structural members are delaminating from the hull because the core material between the fiberglass skins has turned to mush. The repair process involves cutting out large sections of fiberglass, removing all the rotted core material, drying out the cavity, installing new core, and re-glassing. This isn't a weekend project or a modest repair bill. This is tens of thousands of dollars in work, often approaching or exceeding what the boat is worth. Here's where it gets worse for J30 owners. Because this core rot issue is so widespread, and because the repairs are so expensive relative to the boat's value, the market for J30s has completely collapsed. A boat that might have sold for $30,000 15 years ago now struggles to find buyers at $8,000 or $10,000. And even at those depressed prices, buyers are scarce because everyone knows about the core rot issue. Any potential buyer either needs to factor in massive repair costs or plan to sail the boat as is knowing that the structure is compromised. Dealerships have responded by simply refusing to take J30s in trade. Even if an owner is willing to take a huge loss on trade-in value, dealers don't want the liability of having a structurally questionable boat sitting on their lot. What if they sell it to someone and the deck collapses? What if someone gets hurt because a structural failure occurs while sailing? The legal exposure isn't worth the minimal profit margin they might make, so they politely decline, suggesting the owner try to sell it privately, which of course is nearly impossible because private buyers do their research and discover the core rot issue. The parts availability situation compounds the problem. J-Boats has continued building boats and supporting more recent models, but parts and support for 40-year-old J30s has become increasingly difficult. Some parts are no longer manufactured. Some require custom fabrication. This means that even if you find a J30 that somehow has miraculously avoided the core rot issue, you're still facing challenges with maintenance and repairs as the boat ages. The online sailing communities tell the full story. The J30 Class Association Forum, which should be full of enthusiastic owners sharing sailing adventures, instead reads like a support group for people dealing with expensive structural failures. Thread after thread discusses core rot, repair costs, difficulty selling, and frustration with boats that are consuming money faster than owners can earn it. The advice consistently given to prospective buyers is simple. Unless you're getting the boat for free and have the skills and time to do massive structural repairs yourself, walk away. What makes the J30 situation particularly unfortunate is that these boats had legitimate racing pedigree and sailing performance. In their prime, they were competitive and fun boats that served their purpose well. But the construction methods that made them light and fast also made them ticking time bombs for structural degradation. Now, decades later, the bill is coming due, and current owners are discovering that they're holding assets that have transformed into liabilities that dealers won't touch. Number 4, Hunter 31. Moving to number 4, we have the Hunter 31, and this is where we start getting into boats that dealerships actively warn buyers away from. Hunter Marine built a business model around producing affordable sailboats with spacious interiors and modern amenities, essentially making sailboat ownership accessible to buyers who couldn't afford premium brands. The Hunter 31, produced primarily in the 1980s and 1990s, embodied this philosophy perfectly. But it also embodied everything that can go wrong when a builder prioritizes low cost over build quality. The problems with Hunter 31s are so numerous and so consistent that it's hard to know where to begin, but let's start with the deck. Hunter decks from this era used a balsa core sandwich construction, and like the J30, this coring has not aged well. But the Hunter situation is actually worse because the quality control during construction appears to have been inadequate. The balsa wasn't properly sealed, deck fittings weren't bedded correctly from the factory, and the result is that water intrusion and core rot isn't just possible, it's almost inevitable. Marine surveyors report that finding a Hunter 31 without significant deck issues is rare. The soft spots around stanchion bases, winches and cleats are so common that they're expected. But beyond these obvious problem areas, surveyors often find rot extending across large deck sections, around the mast step, and in areas where you wouldn't necessarily expect to find it. The deck can appear fine visually, but when you tap it with a hammer or use moisture detection equipment, the rot reveals itself, but the deck is just the beginning. The hull-to-deck joint on Hunter 31s is notorious for leaking. This critical structural connection, which should be watertight and solid, often shows signs of separation, water intrusion, and inadequate original construction. Water leaking through the hull-to-deck joint doesn't just create annoying drips in the cabin, it promotes rot in the deck core and can compromise the structural integrity of the boat. Repairing a failing hull-to-deck joint requires essentially disassembling and reassembling the entire connection, a job that's both labor-intensive and expensive. The through hulls, those fittings below the waterline that allow water to enter for engine cooling, head discharge and sink drains, are another consistent problem area. Hunter used plastic through hulls in many boats from this era, and these plastic fittings have a finite lifespan. As they age, they become brittle and can fail, potentially leading to the boat taking on water. Replacing through hulls requires hauling the boat, and if you're replacing all of them as responsible ownership demands, you're looking at significant expense. But here's the problem. On a boat worth perhaps $10,000, spending $3,000 or $4,000 on through hull replacement doesn't make economic sense. So many owners defer this maintenance, creating boats that are literally sinking risks. The keel attachment has also been a source of concern on Hunter 31s. The keel bolts, which hold the several thousand-pound keel to the bottom of the boat, can corrode over time. This is true of any boat with a bolt-on keel, but Hunters from this era seem particularly prone to the problem, possibly due to inadequate corrosion protection during original construction. Surveyors who check keel bolts on Hunter 31s often find corrosion, looseness, or conditions that require immediate attention. The cost to drop the keel, clean and replace the bolts, and reinstall everything properly can easily reach $5,000 to $8,000, again a cost that's hard to justify on a low-value boat. The systems and equipment are another nightmare. The electrical systems in many Hunter 31s are a tangled mess of amateur modifications, corroded connections, and inadequate wiring. The plumbing often includes a mixture of original components that are decades past their service life and replacement parts that may or may not be properly installed. The engine, frequently the original diesel from the 1980s, is reaching the end of its economically viable life, and replacement can cost $15,000 to $20,000 more than the boat is worth. Insurance companies have caught on to the Hunter 31's problems. Many marine insurers either refuse to insure Hunter 31s outright or require surveys so extensive and repairs so comprehensive that it's not economically feasible. The insurers that will cover these boats charge premiums that reflect the risk, making the total cost of ownership even less attractive. Here's what happens when someone tries to trade in a Hunter 31 at a dealership. The dealer might agree to look at it, but after a brief inspection, the conversation changes. They'll point out the soft deck areas, the hull-to-deck joint issues, the questionable through hulls, the aging systems. They'll explain that even if they took it in trade for virtually nothing, they'd have to disclose all these issues to any potential buyer, making it nearly impossible to sell. And they'll suggest the owner might have better luck selling privately, or perhaps even considering donation or disposal. The message is clear. We don't want this boat, even for free. Number 3, Ericson 32. At number 3, we have the Ericson 32, and this one surprises many sailors because Ericson had a reputation for building quality boats in the 1970s and 1980s. The Ericson 32 was marketed as a performance cruiser with racing pedigree, and many were successfully campaigned in club racing while also serving as comfortable cruisers. But specific design and construction issues have made the Ericson 32 a boat that dealerships now avoid, and owners are discovering that they've invested in boats with serious problems. The primary issue with the Ericson 32 centers on the keel and rudder design. Ericson used a fin keel and spade rudder configuration, which provides good performance but requires proper engineering and quality construction. Unfortunately, the Ericson 32 has proven to have vulnerabilities in both areas that have led to catastrophic failures, including documented cases of keel and rudder losses at sea. The keel attachment uses a system of internal floors and keel bolts that transfer the loads from the keel into the hull structure. On too many Ericson 32s, surveyors have discovered that these internal structural members are inadequately built, that corrosion has compromised the keel bolts, or that the fiberglass work attaching these components is delaminating. There are documented cases of Ericson 32 keels becoming loose, developing play, or in the most severe cases, separating from the hull entirely. A keel loss at sea is one of the most catastrophic failures that can occur, typically resulting in immediate capsize and sinking with minimal time for the crew to react or deploy safety equipment. The rudder system presents similar concerns. The spade rudder is held in place by the rudder stock and bearings at the top, with no support underneath. This is a common design in performance boats, but it requires quality construction and proper maintenance. On Ericson 32s, the rudder stock tubes have been known to corrode, the bearings to wear prematurely, and the structural attachment of the rudder tube to the hull to show signs of weakness. There are multiple documented cases of Ericson 32 rudders failing, either through stock breakage or complete rudder loss, leaving boats without steerage and in serious danger. What makes these issues particularly problematic is that they're not always visible or easily detectable without invasive inspection. The keel bolts are inside the bilge, often difficult to access and properly assess. The rudder stock passes through a tube that hides the condition of the stock itself. A basic survey might miss these issues, and by the time they're discovered, the damage is often extensive and expensive to repair. Dropping a keel for proper inspection and bolt replacement can cost $8,000 to $12,000. Rudder system repairs can run similar amounts. On a boat whose market value might be $20,000 to $30,000, these repairs represent significant portions of the total value. The deck and hull construction also present problems on many Ericson 32s. The boats were built with balsa core decks, and like the J30 and Hunter 31, this coring has proven vulnerable to water intrusion and rot over the decades. The hull itself is generally solid fiberglass and holds up well, but the deck issues can be extensive and expensive to address properly. Some Ericson 32s have deck cores that are so deteriorated that large sections need to be rebuilt, a job that can easily exceed $15,000. The parts availability situation has become increasingly challenging as Ericson as a company has been out of business for decades. Finding replacement parts often means locating used parts from boats being parted out or having items custom fabricated. This drives up maintenance costs and makes owning an Ericson 32 increasingly impractical for anyone who doesn't have significant mechanical skills and fabrication resources. Dealerships have responded to these issues by essentially blacklisting Ericson 32s. The combination of potential structural failures, expensive repairs, liability concerns, and difficulty selling makes these boats unattractive as trade-ins or consignment inventory. A dealer would rather pass on a potential sale than take on the risk and headache of dealing with an Ericson 32. Online sailing forums reinforce this, with consistent advice to potential buyers that unless they're experienced sailors with significant technical and financial resources, they should look at different boats. Number 2. Dehler, Utsit 30. One design. At number 2, we have a boat that many American sailors have never heard of, but European sailors know all too well, the Dehler 30. One design. Dehler is a German manufacturer that has produced boats for decades, and the 31 design was created as a racing boat with a one design class structure. On paper, it sounds good. A standardized racing boat that's also suitable for cruising. In practice, it's become a boat that dealerships on both sides of the Atlantic are refusing to handle. The Dehler 30 One design's problems stem from overly aggressive design choices aimed at maximizing racing performance. The boat is built extremely light, with a hull structure that prioritizes weight savings over structural margin. This creates a boat that's fast in the right conditions, but that lacks the robustness needed for long-term durability or for handling conditions outside the narrow performance envelope. The construction uses extensive coring and lightweight building methods that have not aged well. Water intrusion into the core materials has led to delamination, soft spots, and structural concerns. But beyond the typical coring issues seen on other boats, the Dehler 30 OD has a more fundamental problem. The entire structure is so lightly built that normal sailing loads can cause damage. Owners report stress cracks appearing around highly loaded areas, bulkheads separating from the hull, and structural flexing that suggests the boat is simply not robust enough for the sailing it was designed to do. The keel design has been particularly problematic. The Dehler 30 OD uses a deep fin keel that provides excellent performance, but that also creates significant loads on the keel attachment structure. Multiple owners have reported keel bolt issues, structural concerns around the keel area, and in some cases keel movement or play that indicates serious problems. The repair costs for keel issues can be astronomical relative to the boat's value, and finding yards and tradespeople familiar with Dehler construction in North America is challenging. The deck layout and hardware installation have also proven problematic. The boats were designed with minimal through-deck hardware to save weight and reduce holes in the structure, but the hardware that is installed often shows signs of inadequate backing, stress cracking around attachment points, and fastener pullout. Chain plates, which attach the standing rigging to the hull and bear enormous loads, have been known to show movement or distortion on Dehler 30 ODs, a serious safety concern. The sailing characteristics contribute to the boat's poor reputation. The Dehler 30 OD is tender, meaning it heels easily and significantly, and it has limited stability reserve. This makes it exciting and fast in experienced hands, but also means it's easily overpowered and potentially dangerous if not sailed conservatively. There are reports of Dehler 30 ODs being knocked down in conditions that more conservatively designed boats would handle without drama. Parts availability is a nightmare for Dehler 30 OD owners, particularly in North America, where Dehler has limited market presence. Getting replacement parts often means ordering from Germany with long lead times and high costs, or trying to source used parts from the limited pool of boats. This makes maintenance expensive and time-consuming. Insurance companies have become increasingly reluctant to insure Dehler 30 ODs. The combination of structural concerns, performance characteristics that can be dangerous in inexperienced hands, and limited market presence makes these boats unattractive risks. Premiums are high when coverage is available at all. Dealerships won't touch Dehler 30ODs for several reasons. First, there's minimal market for them, particularly outside Europe. Second, the structural and design issues create liability concerns. Third, the inability to easily source parts and support makes them impractical for dealers to service and stand behind. When an owner approaches a dealership about trading in a Dehler 30OD, the answer is typically a polite but firm no, regardless of the boat's apparent condition. Number 1. Catalina 30. And here we are at number 1, the Catalina 30, and this is going to shock a lot of people because Catalina is one of the largest and most successful sailboat manufacturers in America. The Catalina 30, produced from 1975 through the mid-1980s, is one of the most popular sailboats ever built, with thousands produced and still sailing today. So how can this boat be number 1 on a list of boats so bad that dealerships refuse to sell them? The answer lies in a perfect storm of design issues, construction shortcuts, and systemic problems that have made early Catalina 30s, particularly those built in the 1970s, boats that knowledgeable dealers actively avoid. The core issue with early Catalina 30s is widespread and severe blistering of the gel coat and underlying fiberglass, a condition known as boat pox or osmotic blistering. This occurs when water penetrates the gel coat and reaches the fiberglass laminate beneath, where it reacts with chemicals in the resin, creating acidic compounds that cause blisters to form. In severe cases, the blisters are so extensive and deep that they compromise the structural integrity of the hull itself. Catalina 30s from the 1970s are notorious for this problem. Some boats have thousands of blisters covering large portions of the hull. Some have blisters so deep that they penetrate through multiple layers of fiberglass. The condition has become so associated with Catalina 30s that marine surveyors automatically assume blistering will be present and are surprised when they find a hull that's clean. The repair process for severe blistering is extensive and expensive. It involves hauling the boat, stripping off the gel coat and affected fiberglass layers, allowing the hull to dry completely, which can take months, treating the exposed laminate, and then applying new barrier coats and bottom paint. The cost for this work can easily reach $15,000 to $25,000 for a severely affected hull. And here's the problem. Even after this expensive repair, the blisters can return because the underlying issue is with the resin chemistry used in the original construction. But the blistering is only the beginning of Catalina 30 problems. The boats suffer from systemic deck and structural issues as well. The hull-to-deck joint, which should be a strong, watertight connection, is notorious for leaking on Catalina 30s. Water intrusion through this joint leads to interior water damage, mildew, rot in wooden components, and deterioration of the headliner and interior. Repairing the hull-to-deck joint properly requires essentially taking the boat apart, a job that's prohibitively expensive. The deck itself has coring issues on many Catalina 30s. Water intrusion around deck fittings has led to rot in the balsa or plywood core, creating soft spots and structural weaknesses. The deck around the mast step, around stanchion bases, and around the chain plate attachment areas are particularly vulnerable. Some Catalina 30s have decks that are so compromised that walking on certain areas feels spongy, and repairs require cutting out and replacing large deck sections. The ballast installation has also been a source of problems. Early Catalina 30s used internal lead ballast that was encapsulated in the bilge. Over time, the encapsulation can deteriorate, and the ballast can shift, creating a dangerous situation. There are reports of Catalina 30s where the ballast has moved, changing the boat's stability characteristics and creating a serious safety hazard. Properly securing shifted ballast requires extensive work and significant expense. The keel bolts are another concern. The bolts that hold the external ballast keel to the hull can corrode over decades, particularly if water has been leaking through the hull-to-deck joint and collecting in the bilge. Corroded keel bolts can fail catastrophically, leading to keel loss and capsizing. Replacing keel bolts requires dropping the keel, a major undertaking that can cost $8,000 to $12,000. The electrical and plumbing systems on 40 to 50-year-old Catalina 30s are typically disasters. Decades of owner modifications, jerry-rigged repairs, and corroded components create systems that are unsafe, unreliable, and would require complete replacement to bring up to current standards. The engines are often original and nearing or past the end of their useful lives, with replacement costs of $15,000 to $20,000. Here's where it gets really bad for Catalina 30 owners. Despite all these problems, these boats are still relatively common in the used market because so many were built. This creates a situation where supply far exceeds demand, and prices have collapsed. Catalina 30s that might have sold for $20,000 or $30,000 10 or 15 years ago now struggle to find buyers at $5,000 or $8,000. And even at those depressed prices, buyers are scarce because anyone doing research discovers the litany of problems. Dealerships have responded by refusing to take Catalina 30s in trade. The liability is too high. If they sell a Catalina 30 and the new owner discovers severe blistering, a leaking hull-to-deck joint, or a compromised keel, there's potential for legal action against the dealer. Even with proper disclosure, dealers don't want boats on their lots that require tens of thousands in repairs just to be structurally sound. The minimal profit potential isn't worth the risk and hassle. Insurance companies have similar concerns. Many marine insurers either refuse to insure older Catalina 30s or require surveys so thorough and repairs so extensive that owners simply can't afford the coverage. The boats that do get insured pay premium rates that reflect the high-risk profile. The online sailing community tells the full story. The Catalina 30 forums and discussion groups are filled with owners discussing blistering repairs, deck rot, keel issues, and difficulty selling. The advice to potential buyers is consistent. Avoid early Catalina 30s unless you're getting the boat for next to nothing. Have the skills to do extensive repairs yourself and understand that you may never be able to sell it. Later Catalina 30s, particularly those from the mid-1980s, had improved construction and suffer fewer of these issues, but the entire model has been tainted by the problems of the earlier boats. So there you have it, 5 sailboats so problematic that even dealerships whose business depends on selling boats are refusing to touch them. From the J30's core rot to the Catalina 30's systemic construction failures, each of these boats represents a different type of maritime nightmare. But they all share one characteristic. They're boats that looked like good values until the problems revealed themselves. And now current owners are discovering they're holding assets that have become liabilities no one wants. If you're boat shopping and encounter any of these models, proceed with extreme caution. Get the most thorough survey possible from a surveyor who knows the specific issues with that model. Do extensive online research and talk to current owners. And seriously consider whether the initial purchase price savings are worth the long-term headaches and potential major repair expenses. Remember, if a boat seems like an amazing deal, there's usually a reason. If you found this information valuable, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Next week, we're exposing the truth about boat loans and marine financing, including the predatory practices that trap buyers into boats they can't afford and can't sell. And drop a comment below sharing your experiences with any of these boats or other models that should be avoided. The community's shared knowledge is what protects future buyers from making expensive mistakes. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the sailboat market, if even the dealer won't touch it, that's your sign to run away fast.